Secretary and Head of Legal and Chief Compliance Officer at the CFAO Nigeria Group. Ayokunle holds a second-class upper LLB honorable degree from the University of Ibadan, an executive diploma in international law and diplomacy from Kingsland Foundation, and a certificate in global governance and diplomacy from the European School for Business for Leadership Development. Ayokunle has won several awards, including the 2019 Nigeria Legal Awards 40 Under 40 from the ESQ magazine, the 2022 Africa 40 Under 40 Awards, and the 2020 Modern Governance 100 General Councils Award, the 2022 Modern Governance 100 Global and Ethics Leader Award from Diligent Corporation, New York. He has also been in the Legal 500 GC Power List, Nigeria 2024. Ayokunle holds fellowships from the Institute of Management Consultants, Nigeria, FIMC, and the Global Academy of Finance and Management, USA. He's a member of the Nigeria Bar Association, International Bar Association, Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators, Society for Corporate Governance, Nigeria, and the Chartered Institute of Directors, Nigeria. Ladies and gentlemen, please let's welcome Mr. Ayokunle Ayoko. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Victoria. It's nice to be here, and thank you for the introduction. So how do we do this? I'm to speak on startups from a regulatory standpoint, I believe, and
yes, please, from a regulatory standpoint, and of course, what is the role of the Chartered Secretary? We're talking about the board, and we know that apart from your executive directors, non-executive directors, your company secretary plays a very significant role as a member of your board, so ensuring that your board is efficient and adding value, to the business. So as a Chartered Secretary, and of course the Group Company Secretary, CFAO PLC, we're looking forward to learning some new insights about your full composition and, of course, other insights that you have to share. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you, Shadi. I'll say that allow me to speak on this from two standpoints. The standpoint of the Chartered Secretary, and also as someone that has been a part of a startup, having been part of Kaizen Academy for about 5-6 years, and so I can speak a bit with using the two caps. And I'll say that first, from a chartered company secretary's perspective, I'm not so sure how many startups really think it's important to have a company secretary in the first place, how much more a chartered company secretary. So the first challenge usually when you have startup is to think, why should I spend so much on legal costs when I can outsource? Some might not even bother outsourcing anyway. So you tend to realize that the last thing in terms of costs is spending on legal and spending on company secretarial. However, the problem with that thinking is that you would have a situation where key regulatory things you are meant to keep an eye on, nobody's keeping an eye on it. And then you have a situation where you are facing regulatory hurdles. You are not filing returns. You are not filing your taxes and all of that gamut. And so I'll say that it's a challenge, especially for startups, because one of the things you first think about when you're starting a business is to think about how you can optimally maximize your finances and your startup capital. So I'll say that in recognition of this, I'll say that in setting up a regulatory framework, a legal framework, a compliance framework, one of the things you have to keep in mind is to do an analysis of what works best for you. And I'll say that, yes, I understand a lot of startups that will think, you know what, why can't we just outsource this? Because it might actually be financially more beneficial for you to outsource at the starting point. However, one thing you cannot afford to do is to just take your mind off it completely. And so it's very important to ensure that you set up a structure. You probably get a lawyer or an outsourced law firm to, you know, handle your compliance issues, and so which is very important, because part of what you want is advisory, right? And part of what you want to do. I mean, we learned a lot from my Mr. Shobowale, who has said a lot about the composition of the board. And so part of what you want to also learn is, you know, governance advisory from your lawyers, from your company secretary, on how you want to set up your board. Now, one of the things you have to keep in mind when setting up your board is that, look, like I also said, you don't want to have all comers. You don't want to have a situation where you are not flexible in terms of your decision making, when you have too many people having opinion on how the company should be run. And so those are some of the things you have to keep in mind as well. Now, in coming up, I mean, we learned a lot about board composition, but some of the things I would also, you know, say is that when you are thinking about board composition, you have to first even identify the skill match matrix which you want to you know, see on your board. At times you get a situation where the board is made up of similar skilled people, because that might be your skill set. And so, of course, most times when people pick board members, they generally pick from their circle of friends and all of that. But it's important to, first of all, even identify the skill matrix for which you want to set up the board, and what the board has to be focused on. And then secondly, network. Mr. Shobowale has spoken about network, and I'm going to double down on it. There's no way you can have a successful business without your network, because the truth is, it's people in your network that will give you your first set of, you know, deals, so to say, so first set of briefs. So your network is very critical. At the startup point, most people don't understand what you're doing. Most people don't actually have you have questions of credibility, because people are thinking, who are these guys? Who are they? So new people will find it difficult to do business with you. And so the people that you really would rely on at the starting point are your network. And on to the question about how do you build your network, Mr. Shobowale has suggested joining the IOD. I'll say that, you know, there are other ways you can also do that. You have to leverage social networks. You have to leverage your social platforms like LinkedIn, Twitter. These are platforms you can actually use, and you might not know this, but there are actually people on that network that you can actually leverage on your and then build your business. I can say this because it's something we have tried and at Kaizen and it's worked. And what that does is that it also opens you up to not just local opportunities, but also global opportunities. Then another thing is you have to think about your board composition has to be such that not only do people have experience in the business which you do, you also have to look at functional experience. You have to also look at how many of them have actually been involved in a startup before, or have experienced some level of success in startup businesses. So for instance, now if I'm setting up a board, I have to think about somebody that can think along the lines of innovation. I have to think about people that can start thinking and be comfortable in the line of in line of AI, artificial intelligence. One of the questions I usually recommend to startup and businesses generally is to ask questions about not what the business is going to be in 10 years time, or how will business be in 10 years time, you know, but rather look at what are those things that, whether it's now or whether it's 10 years time, will still be in demand. So for instance, whether it's now, whether it's next year, whether it's 10 years time, you are going to have people that want your services for lower prices. No matter how 10 years, no matter how the world changes, nobody's going to come 10 years time and ask you and say that, you know what, I like your product, I want to pay more. No, nobody's going to do that. Everybody wants to get lower prices. Everybody wants to be up to date in terms of technology. So you have to think along that line too as well. You have to look at boards that can think along the line, that can be forward thinking. I've always asked the question that, especially with African businesses, to say that, look, if you're an African business, are you thinking along the lines of, AI, how AI impacts your business? And for African businesses, most African businesses don't have chief or artificial intelligence officers, which is now known as CAIO. It's a new thing and it's all over Europe. Literally, companies in Europe, I'll say most companies that are forward thinking already have CAIOs. However, in Africa, we're not thinking along that line. And this is the same market which we all play in. So the board has to be thinking. The board has to be thinking along the lines of what's next, what's the future, what can we do, what is not going to change about our business model or our business strategy. How can we do things better? How can we make it more efficient and yet much more cheaper? So those are the questions you will think about. And then for you to bring people on board, you have to bring people that can think along that line of thoughts, that thought process. Those are the kind of value I think in this age and time you should be looking at from a strategic point of view. I spoke about utilizing network as well. I'll say that, again, startups need to be culturally sensitive and understand the nuances of the local business for which they operate in. Nigerian business is different from the Nigerian business environment is different from other business environments. So you have to understand that, look, you are in a very interesting business environment where crisis is the norm rather than the unusual. So you have to think along that line. Now, I start up again, back to my point about the fact that when we speak about all these things, you are thinking, how do I ensure I can get a board that can actually do some of these things that I've mentioned? And I'll also still align with Kashubo to say that there are times where you bring people on board, you have to explain to them that, look, this is the stage the company is at this point. We cannot afford to pay you at this time for your time, for fees and all of that. And if you get people that buy into that vision, then it's all good. It's important that, and I'll even say that the board is more important from the point of view of credibility at the startup phase, because you are not yet known. A lot of people are thinking, who are these people? Why should I leave the person I'm using to come and join these people? So what the board will do for you, more critically for me, is to give you some sort of credibility, because the persons you are going to bring onto your board are people that are meant to be industry leaders, people that have developed credibility, people that have developed a name in the industry. So when you have people like that on your board, what it then does is that even when they don't know your startup business as an entity, they can look at the people behind your business and think, okay, well, I don't know this business, but I know this person. And if this person is part of this business, then I can't trust this business. So it's very important that at the startup stage, key thing that you should be looking out for is trust. Trust of the market, trust of the customer, trust of the client. And so that's one of the things I would say that is one of the critical things that the board should bring on board. And of course, it's important also to, despite having a board at the startup stage, to be flexible, to be nimble, so that decision making doesn't become so clogged in the wheels of bureaucracy. So I'll say these are my opinion thoughts, and I'll say that this is what I think companies should be looking to when they are setting up the governance systems of a startup and it's important to also key critically. And lastly, as part of my opening remarks, is that businesses must understand that they don't know it all, and everything you have is never planned from the beginning. So you must be nimble enough, you must be flexible enough to try ideas and see whether it works. If it doesn't work, you must be able to reverse and see and re-strategize, and then make decisions that may be more effective. What you don't want to do is to have a company where you are going through, you are doing something and it's not working, and you keep digging into that hole. And so I'll say that you must be flexible, you must take feedback, and you must be nimble. Decision making must not be such that you then, because you have a board, then decision making you present it to the board, and the board is deliberating and doing all of that like the big companies. No, it's important that the advantage, one of the major advantages for small companies is their nimbleness and their ability to make quick decisions. And so if your decision making is such that it's becoming as bureaucratic as a big company, then there's a problem. That means your growth is going to be stifled. So I'll say that it's important to keep all of this in mind, strategic in your composition, board composition, be sensitive to your local nuances, be committed to strong governance practices. Do not think it's expensive and so I can't expend resources on this. No, it's important from the beginning. There are quite a number of things that you do at the beginning that you'll actually see the benefit much later in your business life. So, and then finally, like I've said, feedback and adaptability is very important. It's very important as a business to be nimble, and it's very important to be flexible enough so that your growth is not stifled. Actually, I'll say that's my initial thoughts on this.
Thank you so very much for that. I just have a quick question. For me, can you tell us how does having a board actually help you attract the right investors? I know we've spoken a lot about leveraging governance structure to ensure that your business thrives in the long run, effective decision making through quality of your board composition, and of course, you having a listening ear to feedback and being flexible enough. But how does all that enable you attract investors for your business? Because we all know that for startups, one of our major challenges is funding. We can't hear you. You're muted.
Oh, sorry. How does the board attract funding? Interesting question. I had actually mentioned earlier, one of the things you want to do from the board is to look at a lot of things in your board composition. You want to look at people who have experience in startup businesses. And if they have experience in startup businesses, that means they have a network along that line. So if you have board members that have that experience, you can leverage on this experience, you can leverage on this network. And if you also have board members that understand the criticality of setting up initial governance structures for your business, they are usually very important. When you have good governance structures for your business, attracting the right investor becomes easy. Because usually when you see investors, the investors are usually concerned about two things. Is my investment safe? That's the first question. Second, do they have a structure that I can trust? If you are trying to look for investment and your business is all scattered, no organization, no structure, no tax returns, no compliance, nothing, no governance structure, nothing. How do you invest in that kind of business?
Exactly.
How do you trust them? So
exactly.
One of the things that is important is you also have someone that has that experience. Now, if you have experience in startup business, you then know that one of the things you need to set up is that structure. You want to have that structure because at the end of the day, if you're even presenting to this investor, the investor is looking out for this thing. So to build trust and to understand that, yes, you are actually capable and you can actually save with my investment. Then secondly, you also have to have board members that have a wide network. That's the honest truth. So people that can make calls and then you can actually, they can make calls for you to even get to the boardroom to make your presentation.
Yeah.
So you must also have people with network. You must have people that understand how startups operate. You must have people that have good understanding about how the governance system and the dynamics of the governance structure framework should work. You must have basic regulatory documents. You cannot go to an investor where all of your documents are not in place. Then the trust is not going to be there as well. So, and then again, I also mentioned, even you yourself that you are the promoter, it's important to have a very strong network. Some people would put money into that business, not because of your business idea, but because of you and the credibility that they associate with you. If people see you, for instance, if they are connected to you and they have trust in you and they believe in you, then making a case for a business becomes a bit easier, right? So that is one of the reasons why your network must be good. You cannot afford to be a loner if you want to do well in business. You must be such that you are open to all sorts of relationships, not just looking for senior friends. You must go down, you must go up. You can be willing to develop your network, and you cannot afford not to be open. You now have a lot of network platforms right now, and you just must leverage on this. Because the thing with network, personal network, is you are a bit limited if you are just relying on your personal interpersonal relationships. So it's important, for instance, at times also to be a thought leader. So if you're a thought leader and people start knowing you to be, through your thought process, you've explained how you use money, you explain how you do business. People can then relate and say, okay, this person knows how to manage money. So, for instance, I read a lot over the years while we're growing. We read pieces and bits by Bismarck Rewani in the newspaper. So, if, for instance, now he comes with an idea and tells me that I want to do this business, it's going to be easy for me to think that this person that I'm always reading about is going to know how to manage money, and I can feel free with my investment with this person. So it's also important to use these platforms. It's important to speak about the business you do. It's important to open up, and then eventually that is some of the ways I think that you can actually expand your reach in terms of getting investors. And it's very important also. Another advantage of these networks is these platforms is that it doesn't just restrict you to your local environment. Your interpersonal relationships might be, related to your local environment, but the advantage of using this platform is that, whatever it is you do, you can actually open yourself up to a global market, which is very critical at this point. Any business you're doing right now, you have to start thinking about it from a global perspective, because businesses are getting global, and it's important to key into that immediately.
All right, thank you so very much. If I hear you correctly, you cannot overemphasize the importance of networking and then being within the right circles. And as a member of the Supervisory Council of the Young Directors Forum, what passing words are you leaving with our participants today?
Okay, I'll say that a lot of, we've heard a lot from Mr. Shibowale, and in all of our conversations, one of the things I know you need critically is relationship management. Now, let me say a little bit about something about relationship management. One of my former bosses, I like it, Tijani Borodo, who is coincidentally the president of IOD, called me one time and said that, look, relationship management is like a bucket of water. You pick a cup and you take from that bucket of favor from time to time. You take from that bucket, Ensure you keep returning water into that bucket. Ensure you keep taking water into that bucket. Otherwise, one time you will try to take water from that bucket and it will be empty. Basically, what he was trying to say is that relationships must be nurtured. Relationships must be developed. Relationship management is critical. If you are leaving a job, make sure you don't burn the bridges. If you are leaving a relationship, make sure you don't burn bridges. You never know when to use it. And even if you have good relationships, don't just leave it there. Make sure you do something of value to the person. Make sure it doesn't necessarily have to be money. It might just be constant checking up on the person. Ensure that the line of relationship is never closed. So relationships is very, very important, because eventually it is this relationship that will determine whether that person is willing to support the business which you are about to start or which you are doing. So that relationship is critical. Again, I can't overemphasize network, and it's also important to ensure that when you're bringing people on board, ensure that they are not the type that will disturb your decision making. Because at times you get people on board, and in trying to prove that they are knowledgeable about some things, they might just slow your decision making down and all of that. So I'll say overall, relationship management is one thing you should hold on to. Developing your network is something else I would say you should develop a lot of time to, because at the end of the day, people do business. It's people that do business. Not business ideas don't run itself. People do business, and so it's important that you keep an eye on the people, keep an eye on the relationship management in terms of the people that support your business, and even also you have to also think about the human factor, about the clients you are dealing with as well. The client must be the win. You must design your business around the customer. And when I say develop your business around the customer, don't think on behalf of the customer. At times you hear a lot of people bring things to bring products out saying, this is how the consumer thinks. But really, how much data have you put into that decision? At times, some of the things that you sell or some of the things you speak about, they're not the things that the customer wants. So it's important to get reliable and very reliable and credible feedback from the market, from the clients, from the consumer, so that you can then use that to fine-tune your value proposition.
Very much, Mr. Ayokunle Ayoku. It was a delight to have you, erudite speaker, experienced non-executive director, and chartered secretary. Thank you for honoring us with your presence. Over to you, Victoria.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Next speaker is Mrs. Yemisi Afariogun. Mrs. Yemisi Afariogun is an architect whose creativity, exceptional work ethics, and unique insight into the dynamics of the building design and real estate development niche define her as a valuable industry player. Her